we are working almost 24/7 here in DuPage County. We are one of the busiest centers. It's with all of your help, and we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. As you know, that as a religious institution, we cannot, and a non-profit organization, we cannot endorse any candidate running for any political office. However, we are happy to help CAIR, with Ahmed Rehab's help, who is the Executive Director of CAIR, organize this forum for Tammy Duckworth to be able to come here and present her point of view, as well as for all of you to be able to ask questions. And with that, I would like to introduce Ahmed Rehab, who's going to take it from here, who's much more eloquent and much more capable than I am of conducting these kind of meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Salim Sheikh, and thank you, the Islamic Foundation, for hosting this town hall to get to know a candidate, Tammy Duckworth. I actually wanted to facilitate this gathering in my personal capacity, not in my professional capacity, as a concerned citizen who believes that voters ought to know who they are potentially voting for. I've gotten to know Tammy Duckworth personally as a private citizen. I support her. I believe in her leadership. I believe in her vision. I've heard her stance on many issues, including issues that matter to all Americans, the economy, education, etc., and issues that matter to us as a community, particularly Islamophobia and bigotry, where she has, as the president has been, outspoken against all forms of bigotry, not just Islamophobia, but including Islamophobia in no uncertain words. She has come out to state clearly that there are radicals out there, as we know. We all condemn terrorism, we all condemn violence, we all condemn behavior that we deem to be anti-Islamic, as a matter of fact, but that under no circumstances should we generalize, should we lump everybody in the same boat, should we engage in bigotry, or haphazard generalist statements that can potentially put people in peril. And that's the sort of responsible rhetoric I expect from a potential person who would be a leader in Congress. So I thank you for your stance and for your statements. I also thank you for your service to our nation and the sacrifices you have made. I think it makes every man proud. Before I introduce her to the podium so she can share her perspectives and her views with us, obviously we meet today under a certain dark cloud with what is happening in the Middle East. We lost a great man, a great leader, a great servant of this republic, and of Libyans, Ambassador Chris Stevens, and we held a vigil for him, Muslims did, yesterday downtown Chicago, which was covered by all the media outlets. And I'd like to begin by holding a moment of silence to honor his soul and the three brave souls of those who perished alongside him in that embassy in Libya, who also were great public servants and great friends of the Libyan people. As American Muslims, we condemn the attacks on the embassies. We condemn the violent behavior. We believe in the right of everybody to protest peacefully. We're offended by the film, but we're more offended by the violence that is a response to the film, a senseless response to the film, the misguided targeting of our embassies. We're American Muslims, and these are our embassies like any other American citizen. And we believe that these individuals do not represent the majority of Muslims. Indeed, they have been in the hundreds in some places, a couple thousand at most. You're talking about tens, if not hundreds of millions of citizens out there who are upset by the film and have not reacted in this manner. So it's important for us to put things in perspective. But nonetheless, sometimes one's one too many. And the ones who are vociferous in violence, in radicalism, tend to grab the headlines for all the wrong reasons, while the rest of us moderates, the rest of us with voices of reason, are sitting on the sideline, or our voices are fleshed out. And so we say that it is important for us, Tammy, to not allow the radicals on either side to run the conversation. This movie was created by radicals, individuals who wanted to instigate trouble. And it wasn't out of nowhere. There is an Islamophobia network. These individuals are plugged into this network. This is just one of many various expressions and acts of hatred and bigotry. And we believe in freedom of speech. But the right to freedom of speech is not the only value we believe in. That's not where our values end. The fact that you have the right to lie and hate doesn't mean that we encourage lying and hatred. At the same time, the radicals who responded to this radical behavior by attacking the embassies are even more in the wrong. And I say, and you say, we cannot allow the radicals on either side to run the conversation. We need to be at the helm of the conversation. So with that context that's happening today, with the bigotry that we face in Illinois and the hate crimes that we faced in the past couple of months, with the statements that we've heard from this fine woman, fine leader, I would like now to welcome her and applaud her to the podium to hear her words. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for letting me be here today. I'd like to use this opportunity that you've given me to introduce myself. Some of you know me already. There are folks who supported me back when I last ran in 2006. And people who have reached out to me since we started the campaign over 16 months ago. I can't believe I've been campaigning for 16 months. But that's the nature of politics these days. I really would like to just talk to you at first about my background so that you, at the end of today, have an understanding of who I am as a person. Because there are going to be questions that don't get asked here today. There are going to be questions that may come up 6 months from now, a year from now, that we've not even thought about. And I think it's important for you to understand who I am as a person, how I think, how I respond to issues, because you need to have that feeling that I met her, I taught her, I think this is how she's going to respond. So for me, that is more important than any answer I'm going to give you to any question today. So let me just start by telling you about my background. I was born in China. My father was a Vietnam veteran who, after the Vietnam War, tried to come back to the U.S., was not treated very well, like so many of our brothers and sisters who tried to come home from the war, and immediately went to work for the United Nations. So I grew up with my father working for the United Nations development programs and refugee programs in Southeast Asia. My mother is Thai. I was born in Bangkok. And I spent my childhood as an American child living overseas and seeing kids struggling in refugee camps. Later on, my father moved from the United Nations and went to work for a large multinational corporation. And when I was about 8 years old, we moved to Indonesia. And I grew up for the largest part of my childhood in Indonesia. I lived there for over 8 years. I speak fluent Indonesian. And so I then spent my childhood between Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia. And so my background is an international one. My background as an American is of having grown up in the minority in a foreign country. And so I understand the challenges that comes with maintaining your identity when you are in a minority. When my dad was 55, I was 15, he lost his job. And the company he worked for was sold when the stock market crash happened in the 1980s. And nobody would hire a 55-year-old man. And then he turned 56, and then he turned 57. And every year it was the same thing. You're too old, you're overqualified, we can hire someone for half your price at half your age. And we ended up as a family on food stamps at a public school in Hawaii. And it was really the first time that I lived in the United States was in my teens, was when I was 15 years old. And thank God for those programs like Pell Grants and student loans and food stamps and good-hearted people who stepped forward. And, times there were school teachers who bought me dinner because they knew that had it not been for them, I wasn't going to eat that night. But because my family worked really hard, my mother took in sewing. My dad kept trying to find a job. I was the only one at 15 to have a job because they would hire a 15-year-old kid for minimum wage, but they weren't going to hire a 58-year-old man. And then I was able to go to college and live my American dream. But my childhood growing up in America was one of translating for my mother, who doesn't speak English very well. She didn't become a citizen until she was in her 50s. And then when I became a soldier and we would go overseas in places, you know, it was constantly people saying, okay, you're American, but really, where are you from? Because just because I don't have blonde hair and blue eyes and I don't look like my dad's side of the family, people questioned whether or not I was American. And I would say, no, I'm from America. Actually, my father's family fought in the Revolution. I'm a daughter of the American Revolution. I'm a daughter of an immigrant. So I straddle both worlds. And I think this is why my attitude towards the terrible things that have been happening is one that's a very pragmatic one. We have to listen to one another. All Americans love this nation. It doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from, where you pray, who you love. We love this nation. And the only way we move forward is by listening to one another. So I was really, I'm not going to talk about Mr. Walsh much, but I will say I was absolutely horrified when he made the comments that he made. Not because I don't think that there are radical Islamic fundamentalists out there plotting to disrupt our nation, but because he would put in a very generalized statement entire populations of Americans at risk and single them out to be the subjects of fear and distrust. And that is never acceptable for anyone, especially, and it is especially wrong of someone who holds public office. When you have a public stature, you have the responsibility you have to take responsibility for your words. And I think what we need to do now is, you know, especially with the unrest that's happening all over the Islamic world right now, what we need now is cool heads. We don't need to be using the situation for political gain. I was appalled by the fact that the Romney campaign put out the statement that they did when they did, but I wasn't very happy that the response came from the Obama campaign instead of from the administration. This is not a situation to be exploited for political points. This is a time for Americans to come together, because while we know the difference between Democrats and Republicans in the political process here, the person on the street in Libya or Tunisia or Yemen, all they see is American. They don't see, oh, that's a Democratic presidential candidate, you know, that's a Republican candidate. They just see American. And if they see hate, it only spawns more hate. So we have to just take deep breaths, figure out what's going on, go after the terrorists who would harm all of us. And those terrorists didn't just harm Americans and kill Americans in Libya. They harmed their own country. Because right now, there are 2 warships off the coast of Libya and drones and special forces hunting them down. But that also puts the innocents in Libya at risk. And so when we talk about these terrorists hurting Americans and hurting our communities, it's everyone. It's the innocents. And we have to just take deep breaths, figure it out, execute a plan of action, and then move forward. And so with that, I'm gonna stop talking. I prefer to listen and answer questions. And I will try to answer your questions as best as I can. I won't promise to have an answer for everything, but I will only promise to tell you what's in my heart and how I make my decisions. And if I don't know something, I will tell you I don't know.
That sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if you have a question for Ms. Duckworth, if you could, stand up and in a clear, loud voice, state your question, and I'm sure that, like you said, she'll try to answer it to the best of her ability.